What's up, everyone? WWE Bash in Berlin is in the books in Germany, and yet again another five-match show, and some interesting developments on this show. I think once again, probably pretty predictable in terms of the finishes and all that, as we discussed in our predictions video. But we'll talk about all these matches and get your thoughts once you guys hop on in here. But good to see you guys as always. Fun doing these live shows after the PLEs each month. We don't get to do many of those during the week, but yes, so good to see you guys. As always, we've got Barry Uso, we've got Juan. Great to see you guys as well. And yes, we did not get the turn from Kevin Owens, but I'm telling you guys, it's coming. That turn is coming. Trust me, we're going to talk about it with Kevin Owens because all the hints were there that Kevin Owens is going to turn on Cody Rhodes at some point soon. It just didn't happen here. And, I said going in, I didn't think that I was all the way there on that turn happening here. It just felt too obvious. We said that. And I can see why they're doing a little bit of a slow burn here. But could make you wonder if they're going to do this rematch, though, with Cody and Owens at Bad Blood to add that to the mix. Because, based on how this played out, I think it's pretty clear that you're going to get some of the matches that we expected in terms of like the Bad Blood card. You're going to get Priest versus Balor, I would think. You're definitely getting Rhea versus Liv because Rhea pinned Liv and all that. So I think that is, probably a pretty obvious direction. So the question is, what will happen with Cody and Owens, and how much does all this kind of get put into play, I guess, moving forward. But again, I appreciate you guys hopping on. We don't do these live streams often, but we're going to jump in and talk few technical issues, but we will work on that. And as I always tell you guys, sometimes if the video is not working well, just listen, because sometimes that's just the way it works here with my streaming. So we'll do our best, and if this thing turns out to be a mess, then you can just listen to the replay rather than watch it. Anyways, let's talk about this a little bit, and let's start with that Cody and Kevin Owens, because that's the one that started the show. And look, I think this is one, guys, where, like I said, it was, you knew who was going to win, right? You knew Cody was going to win this thing, but it was really just a matter of how they were going to do it. And I think as you were seeing the match go along, you were starting to see that they were building to those big moments, right? Of the big possibilities to have it kind of put right there for you, to where Owens was going to have the chance to turn. They had to at least sit it right in front of us to say, all right, Kevin Owens, let's see who you really are, right? And they put it right there to where, it seemed like he had those chances to really, at each turn, to sort of finally make the turn. And, commentary, I thought Michael Cole and Wade Barrett were fantastic, not just in this match, but the entire show, really just putting over the idea that, okay, is he going to go after the leg? Because that is what they had played up on SmackDown, as you guys know. And they were talking about, Owens bringing up the injured leg for Cody and all this other stuff. And then finally we saw Cody go to the top, and what happens? The leg buckles. He's not able to have, that move. And so then you have Owens have to make the decision. Does that killer instinct come back into it? We've talked about that over the past couple of weeks. Ultimately Owens is kind of half and half, where at first he's like, I'm not going to do that. And then what does he do after that, right? He does eventually say, okay, I'm gonna kind of go after the leg a little bit, but he's not going to go for the power bomb on the apron, right? He's not going to go that far. And so it's like one of those things where they're really just telling the story that Owens is thinking about it, and he's thinking about it a little bit harder now than he was before, but he still is not all the way there yet. But I think after the match, what we saw were a couple different things. If you saw, and you go back and watch the replay afterwards, Cody and Owens are in the ring, and you have Owens just kind of Cody's grabbing Owens' hand, and Cody wants to raise his hand, but Owens is like, no, I'm not raising my hand. Like, I wasn't, don't congratulate me on losing. Like, don't do that to me. Like a pity thing, right? Don't do that. And so you could tell Owens get a little frustrated that Cody would do that. And so Owens says, no, I don't think so. Then he holds up Cody's arm instead, because Cody was the winner. And that's how they're kind of pushing it. But there was also where, if you go back, the camera zooms in on Kevin Owens, And, the camera's right there in Owens' face because they're setting it up to make you think, right, that Owens is about to turn on Cody. So they put the camera right there, and Owens is like, no. And he shoves the camera out of the way because he doesn't, he's like, no, get out of my face. And it's those kind of things, right? With this era, that's how they play this up. And so I think this is definitely something that they're pushing and hinting towards. And I think it's going to be kind of fun once we actually get there, because there's no doubt that they have this in place now. And, again, you can go and kind of see all the hints they put in. Cole on commentary continues to bring up that killer instinct and those kind of things. And I just think that, I feel like we have to head towards the rematch next, because I think it's pretty clear we're not getting to that Cody and Orton match maybe this soon. Even though you kind of finished off Orton and Gunther with, the thought that, all right, they're moving on from this. Gunther beat Orton. They're done here. Now Orton has to move on to the next thing, which you would think is him getting now back involved with this Cody and Owens stuff. But you do feel like Cody and Owens were far from done here. So would not be shocked at all if you have a rematch at Bad Blood. And maybe that's where, okay, Owens gets a second chance. He doesn't win that one either. And that's what sort of, precipitates the turn on Cody. But I think they were definitely hitting at it in this match. And it's just a matter of, when is Kevin Owens, as Wade Barrett was screaming at him on commentary, and yet Owens tell him to shut up. When is he going to get that killer instinct back all the way, and not just, 50-50, where he thinks about it, but maybe not all the way yet. Owens is going to come back all the way, and we've said SmackDown needs some of those top heels outside of the Bloodline. So I do think that is in motion, and I thought it was a great match. I mean, I'm curious. You guys let me know in the comments what your favorite match was on the show. I think that was, right there near the top for me with that. And, probably the strap match was good stuff, even though it's a little bit different, right? Strap match is difficult because it's a four corners thing. It's not a pinfall. It's not, submission, anything like that. So they're different matches, but I thought this was probably the best thing on the show with Cody and Owens, just from your, traditional wrestling match standpoint. So again, guys, appreciate you hopping on. Leave your comments as always. We don't do just kind of, we don't necessarily run through every single match move by move or anything. We just kind of share reaction to what happened and get your thoughts on. And these are always tough because, especially, the international PLEs, and again, the Germany crowd was just fantastic. Like they were awesome. But we don't get as big of an audience on a Saturday afternoon. And if you are in the States as well, it's a big football afternoon also. So, and again, bear with me on the video stuff. I know it kind of cuts in and out sometimes, but I appreciate you guys watching and or listening as well. But something we did have here on the show, we did have new women's tag team champions. And I told you guys that I was not sure exactly whether they were going to do this one way or the other, right? It was either Bianca and Jade won the titles back, and now we just get to the next thing to where they eventually break up way down the road maybe, and something happens where they lose their titles, or you go ahead and put something in place here where someone accidentally does something to the other, costs them the match, and, maybe something like that, but I don't know. So I think that was kind of one thing where you could have seen that play out to where they just did not win the titles here, and you had Fyre and Dawn retain. But we said, I just think there's more value to have, these guys, or have Bianca and Jade back with the championships, because now you can kind of move them back and forth on Raw and SmackDown, and I just didn't think it was time for the breakup yet. So I just did not think it was time for the breakup. But, it makes sense to get the titles back on them, I think. And like I said, I think it was a little underwhelming for some people with Fyre and Dawn in terms of the championship reign. But yeah, I thought it was the best move to put the titles back on Bianca and Jade for now, because I said at earliest, I think you're getting that singles match between those two. Not going to come till WrestleMania 41 if they do that there, I think. So, but we'll see how it pans out on there. So, Josh, yeah, I mean, look, I still think it's coming, but I think there's a couple ways they can do it, and I think they were definitely teasing it on this show, and of course they teased it last week on SmackDown too. Didn't do it as much this week, and remember, I think something else too, what I thought was interesting, Wade Barrett did reveal what Kevin Owens said to Cody on SmackDown last night. And it was, don't forget you asked for this. And I think that was something very important too, even though they kind of nonchalantly mentioned it on commentary. But I think that is something where, it didn't have to happen here. It can still happen after the fact. But I think, like I mentioned a second ago, I think all the things that happened after this match from Owens made you think that they are putting that in motion. But who knows? Maybe this is where Orton gets involved. And like I said, what was that? I probably said that after SummerSlam. Like, maybe this is a situation where you think Owens is going to turn, but it winds up being Orton being the person who turns, and Owens doesn't. So I think there's a lot of ways to go with this, but I just, I said in the predictions, I was not completely sold that this was going to be just that full turn, because it just felt too obvious to do it here. And, even though they hinted at it, they didn't do it here. And so, but we'll see. I mean, I think it's going to be kind of fun to see how it plays out for sure. Yeah, Robert, I mean, I think it's happening, but that's the thing too. It's like we mentioned, like the finishes and those kind of things can be predictable on these PLEs, but sometimes it's like, it's really just figuring out what they're going to do with the story itself and how they do it and all that. So you kind of know who's going to win the matches, but you just don't know how they're going to play it out. Triple H likes his slow burns, right? We've always said that. Like, Triple H, big fan of the slow burn, these stories. And, again, this is kind of that, we're in August, it's kind of that lull now after SummerSlam to get to the Survivor Series, Rumble, WrestleMania. But yeah, I think that, this is kind of where we are with this thing now, for sure. But, let's talk about, we'll go to the main event real quick, and then we get back to the strap match, because I think that, again, I thought that was probably, for me, I didn't really think there's anything bad on the show. It's 5 matches, right? You can't really go bad with that. But, I think Orton losing, like you said, Josh, I think you expected it, but it's just a matter of how is Gunther going to do it. And I think that sleeper has been something that, they definitely pushed, and there's no question about it, right? And I think I know the criticism, like, just from people on the sleeper, is that it's not as sort of suspenseful, I guess you could say, right? Like, it's not as dramatic when you have the finish being the sleeper, because you're just waiting for a guy to get basically, counted out from the referee, basically just waiting for him to say, all right, that's it, this guy's out, which, that is more of your serious style and approach, right? Which you would expect from someone like Gunther. But no, it's not as dramatic as some of your, your big pinfall attempts after finishers and all that. But yeah, I think, as we said, Gunther winning was not really a question, but I think they did keep pushing that idea that everything for Randy Orton now is about winning that 15th world title, which we know is probably what's going to lead him back to Cody at some point soon. It's really just bringing that up, how much that championship is going to mean to Orton. And that's really what's pushing him through everything, right? At this point in his career, is winning that 15 World Championship. And, the crowd, by the way, to start this match, how great were they? That was just tremendous. And, but they really added a lot to it when you think about just kind of the way this thing played out. But, I think it was going to be just a matter of seeing how Gunther beat him, and seeing, as you guys know, I said in the predictions video, would those two matches tie into each other? If you did Cody versus Owens at the start, if you did Gunther versus Orton at the end, would they tie into each other in any way? But like we said, it's clear they're not rushing anything. Like, they are going pretty slow through this, and they don't have to rush anything, because, as Triple H has said before, and you guys know I talked about it at some points recently, in one of the press conferences after the PLEs. And by the way, if you're watching the post show, I don't even know if they're doing a press conference or anything, but if anything comes out of that, we'll discuss it. But they have to have stuff for Raw and SmackDown too, right? And so they need these kind of things to keep pushing them through Raw and SmackDown to get to the next PLE and all that. So, so Gunther beating Orton. And I think a question for you guys that I have, and put this on my notes coming in here, what's next for Gunther? Like, we kind of know what's next for Orton. I mean, we don't really have much of a doubt what the eventual destination is for Orton, but what's next for Gunther? When you start looking down the Raw roster and seeing the possibilities for him, I'm curious what you guys think about where they go from here with Gunther, because, I guess you could say, well, they could do CM Punk and all, but I think we're getting CM Punk versus McIntyre, that third and final match in this trilogy. I think we're going to get that at Bad Blood. We'll talk about that in a second. I would assume that's going to be maybe a Hell in a Cell match, something like that. But I think the next thing for Gunther is going to be interesting. What happens, I guess, if Jay gets put out of the Intercontinental title picture, Zayn's still out there coming back at some point. So I'm curious, because, Rollins is kind of out of the picture right now. I guess you could have Seth Rollins come back, do that. But I'm curious to know what you guys think. Yeah, I think Zayn was someone that popped in my mind just because you could do the rematch with that. You've got him kind of laying out right now. You guys know we're waiting for the Jay and Sammy stuff to get back to the Bloodline. And it does seem like that's still a little far away too. You've got the end of November before War Games, if that's how you're going to do it, by bringing Jay and Sammy back into like a War Game setting with Reigns and Jimmy and all that. So yeah, I think Zayn could be an option. But I'm curious to see what's next for Gunther, because I think that there's so many matches he could have, right? I mean, we mentioned the list of opponents that Gunther could have, from Punk to Rollins to, I mean, even a Cena at some point, like on Cena's retirement tour, all these things. There's plenty of people for Gunther to square off with for this championship. So, yeah, again, not a surprise he won this match. I think it's really just now, that was all about the atmosphere of the crowd and everything. And he got his tainted win from King of the Ring now off of his resume. Now he's got a clean victory over Randy Orton. And so now he can move on to the next thing, and we'll see what that is. Yeah, I mean, I think, eventually it's probably not going to happen right now, but you could see a rematch with Priest at some point in the future, once Priest is done with the Judgment Day stuff, which I don't know if he ever will be, but, I think that's something that could happen. So, yeah, Gunther and Orton, sort of your technical type match that you would expect here. Gunther getting the win. So, all right, let's talk about that strap match because, like I said earlier, I think that was, in my opinion, maybe just as good, except a different match from Cody and Owens. But, this was sort of the match it needed to be. This was the one where we said it. It needed to be a little more violent, needed to be a little more physical than that match was at SummerSlam with Seth Rollins as a special guest referee. And, yeah, like as all of you guys are saying, I mean, I think it's definitely one where, Punk had to win the match, as we talked about. I mean, to get you to 1-1, now you've got the, the third and final match in this one-on-one thing ready to go. And, I think that it's one where it isn't for everyone. And I know I've seen some people sort of criticize it. You have the red and green lights in the corners and all that, and you're waiting for guys to touch the corners, and someone gets a move on someone else that now restarts the count, and there's a little bit of something extra to it. But I think it's just having these two guys connected together. That was really what was most important about this match, because you think about how heated this thing has gotten between the two, right? And just having them physically connected via this strap made this a lot more interesting, because there was a lot more things they could do, even though you certainly had some limitations. You can't do your normal type match because these guys are strapped to each other. But yeah, I think that still, for me, I really enjoyed it. There have been some good strap matches previously in wrestling, but, I guess we have to go back WWE-wise to, there have been some good ones over the years. What Triple H and Rock had one way back when, and all that. But yeah, I think it's really a matter of seeing, like I said, who is going to be next. And here's just quickly back to this. I was going to bring up the Gunther thing, but yeah, I mean, Jay could be someone. Braun Breaker. I told you guys, like, back in that's February probably. I'm like, man, I'd love to see Braun Breaker and Gunther at some point, but I don't know if that'll happen soon now. But you could see that match happening in the future. But one guy has the world title, one guy has the Intercontinental Championship. So yeah, if Breaker eventually is going to move up to that world title level. And I think that's a match they'll do. I'd say we would make a prediction on that match. I think that match happens sometime next year. Let's say 2025, Gunther and Braun Breaker. But yeah, no doubt he's on the rise also. But to kind of tie in the strap match here with these two, and got a little blood from CM Punk whipping each of these guys, just whipping each other with a strap. That added to it. And finally, Punk gets the bracelet back, right? That was a big thing, too. And you could tell how they were setting it up at the end, where Punk was not going to touch all four corners. He didn't want to win the match until he got that bracelet back. The first time around, they're playing up, oh, here we go again. Punk's letting his emotions get the best of him. He will not finish the match. He just wants to beat Drew McIntyre, right? That's what he wants to do more than anything. It's not about winning the match. It's about beating this guy. And I think this is more along the lines of what we expected going into SummerSlam. And now, as Robert asks here, who's going to win the third match? And I think that's the real question, right? Because we know we're going to get this. You would assume it's going to happen at Bad Blood. And I think it happens inside Hell in a Cell. I just think it makes the most sense at this point. If you're going to do a final match between these two, the big blow-off match, you put it inside the cell. Some of it leading into the strap match was about, there was no way for these two guys to keep apart from each other, right? And now I think, you've got a scenario where you can do the same thing again. They're just not, they're not physically connected via the strap, but now they're confined within the cell. Although, as we know over the years, not as confined as it used to be when it comes to the cell, where people, it felt like the structure no one could get out of. Well, nowadays it's like they can get out anytime they want. But I do think that makes a lot of sense to do it in there. And I feel like if you're really thinking about this and it kind of ties into our previous question, right, with Gunther. If you want to put Punk in that scenario where now, Punk comes out of this with his first big triumphant rivalry win since his return to WWE. I thought it was wild. I mean, we knew the stat, but it's like Michael Cole bringing up on commentary after this match. First match that Punk has won in WWE in 10 and a half years, which, again, it makes sense because, it wasn't with the company for so long. But that is just one that you kind of just sit there and marinate on. You're like, oh, yeah, it has been that long since CM Punk has had a singles win in WWE. But I could definitely see a scenario where Punk beats McIntyre, because if you do that, you can come out of that getting to Punk versus Gunther. And, like I mentioned, there's so many opponents I think you can get to for Gunther that feel like they're there. It's just when are those people kind of out of their current storylines, then to get into a storyline with Gunther. That would be the case for Punk. If he were to beat McIntyre, which, look, you could also do Gunther and McIntyre too. No one's going to be complaining about that, I don't think. But I think if you're looking at it long term and you feel like Punk is someone you at least want to have that world championship match with, because, he was right there, right? Think back to the Royal Rumble. He's the final two with Cody, and Punk is throwing Cody out away from being, in a world championship spot at WrestleMania against Seth Rollins. And remember, too, that was the match we thought we were going to get to. So if you want to get Punk back into that, I think he needs to beat McIntyre to do it. And, to come out on top. I don't know that it hurts Drew coming out of this, to be honest with you. I feel like at this point, for me, now look, he can't lose every match for the rest of the year or anything, but I feel like Drew McIntyre is kind of a made man now, to where he's been doing so. This is the best work of his career. And I think McIntyre can do anything coming out of this feud with Punk, and you're still going to be just fine looking at McIntyre as a top player in WWE. And so, sure, you could ask the question, well, where would you go next with McIntyre? That's something I would have to look at and think about. But, still, I think getting Punk back into the world title picture, even if he doesn't win it, I do feel like that you do want a Punk world title match at some point, probably by the end of the year, because, too, longevity is something, right? You just never know. Injuries, like we know that with Punk, like you just never know. And so if you want to do that, Punk versus Gunther at Survivor Series maybe is a world championship match. I'd be for that, right? Because you feel like the main attractions for Survivor Series is going to be, the War Games match with the Bloodline. But if you decide to do, Punk versus Gunther, maybe you have a Cody versus Orton there or something like that. That's big matches, right, for Survivor Series. So, I like the idea of Punk winning the feud and moving on to something else because, I feel like McIntyre could be fine coming out of it. Punk could be too, but I do feel like getting a world championship match for Punk probably makes a lot of sense for them at this point. So, and look, as as the lounge says here, Larry could be the one that cost Drew the match at Bad Blood. Now, that would be the ultimate full circle moment, is to either have Larry or AJ Lee come back, which that's going to be rumored from now until the end of time with AJ. We're going to be talking AJ Lee return rumors forever. So, so we'll see. But I'm going to get to your other comment here, Robert, in a second about Cody and Solo. But I do want to quickly mention the tag team match. That's the only other thing we really haven't mentioned. We did mention the tag team championship match for the women's side earlier. But the other tag team match, Priest and Rhea beating Dominik and Liv. You guys know I went back and forth on the two tag team matches because I was just like, well, you could understand why WWE would want to do it this way, but you could also understand why they would want to do it the other way. And I think with that one, for me, it was you had to set up Rhea versus Liv for Bad Blood, and I thought Rhea pinning Liv in a tag team match, you could justify that. You could have done it another way too, but now, it's all but official. Like, you're going to get that match, and, that sets up your sort of big rematch from SummerSlam. And because Balor and Judgment Day interfered, you could tell Balor is fuming after this because he's thinking, well, we have the numbers advantage, so we're going to automatically take care of these two because we have more numbers. at each turn, it felt like, all right, this is it. Judgment Day, JD comes out, Carlito comes out, Balor comes out. There's just too much. The Terrence wins, can't overcome it. And then what happens? They do that, right? And so I think, that is something that they definitely played up here and are sort of sending you now into that direction of you're going to get those one-on-one matches. Rhea and Liv, Priest and Balor. And, I thought this was one that, look, just Priest and Rhea, you think about the change, right, for them over the past couple months and just where they were a couple months ago versus where they are now. We knew that the fans were just completely pushing and pushing to want to cheer these two. They were already doing it. But now, think about just kind of how this story has gone. And I know I did see some people very upset that Judgment Day or that Dominik and Liv lost this match and how they needed this a lot more than Priest and Rhea. And we said that too. Like, it makes sense if you just look at it from that standpoint, that they do need this a little bit more to kind of, legitimize the group without them two. But, ultimately, if they are to get some big wins, like let's say Balor beats Priest, or let's say Liv does retain against Rhea in the rematch. Don't know if that happens, but those are the kind of things that will probably feel a lot more big and special than just winning a mixed tag team match, right? So I wouldn't quite go there just yet to say that this just completely destroys the Judgment Day or anything, because it was all about the Judgment Day, the new Judgment Day, getting the advantage at SummerSlam. You had to allow Priest and Rhea to get theirs back at some point. This is where it happens. And so, now I think is the opportunity if you want to go a little bit further with Judgment Day, give them something bigger they can kind of sink their teeth into. I think winning one or more of those singles matches that you feel like you're going to get at Bad Blood makes the most sense there. But, all right, we'll move into some other stuff here. I know, again, we kind of touched on all the matches, but as always, love to know what you guys are thinking, not just with this card, but also what we could see in the future, as we now are on the road to Bad Blood. That's going to be the next big premium live event that we're going to have here in WWE. And so Robert says, I hope we don't do Cody versus Solo again. Well, I was going to get back to that because, yes, we do know Solo said that he's coming for the champion, whether it was Cody or Owens. I cannot see them doing Cody versus Solo again. I don't know that I ever in WWE history see Cody versus Solo again as a match. Now, I'm kind of exaggerating there, but I don't think that is another World Championship match that they can do because I don't know how you top the previous one in terms of how it played out. You're not going to have a big return unless, I guess, The Rock comes back. That's the only thing you could do to top the Roman Reigns return for that match. But it will, once again, not be about Cody versus Solo. It will be about what's going to happen around them. And I just do not think that's something they can go back to, regardless of what Solo said on SmackDown, right? About how he was going to be the person that's coming after whoever. I cannot see that. And I really don't see like a triple threat match. I can't see Cody versus Owens versus Solo. Although, I guess if you think about it, if you want to find a way for Owens to turn, maybe. But even in that, like, how would it make sense for Owens to turn on Cody and somehow help the Bloodline? Like, it wouldn't make a lot of sense. So I do not like the idea of Cody versus Solo again. And I would have to believe that WWE probably going to have something else in store before we get to that. But the question is, what do you do with the Bloodline in the meantime, right? Because, you are going to have that big SmackDown move to USA in a couple weeks. Roman Reigns, will he be there? Will he not be there? There's been a lot of debate on that. He was initially advertised for it. Then he was pulled from the show. But remember, he was pulled from the advertisement after he was taken out by the Bloodline. So you could almost feel like that's part of the story. And you could still have Reigns show up, or maybe that's where Jimmy shows up, or Heyman shows up, whatever. But I do not think we're getting to Cody versus Solo again. Probably a lot of you will be happy at that, but I do not think we're getting to that. So yeah, Calvin. The championship changed in hands for a long, long time. I don't know if it's going to break Roman's record, but we talked about like these title runs. Triple H a big fan of the long title runs, and we've seen that. Not just at the World Championship level, but even some of the, Gunther's Intercontinental Championship reign, right? That thing was just sort of just a legendary Intercontinental title reign. And so, look, the bottom, the secondary type championships, you could certainly see them change some. But, when you're really thinking about buying into certain title changes, you just know, and that's what we said too, like with Cody's reign, right? It was impossible to convince people after WrestleMania 40 that Cody was going to lose the championship really any time before SummerSlam. But yet you had to have title matches, right? You couldn't just have Cody sit around and, eat chips. Like he had to, he had to actually go out and wrestle matches. Like, he couldn't just, sit around and do nothing in the back. He couldn't just sit back there and have a good time at catering while everyone else is out wrestling. He's the world champion, but yet you can't really convince people that he's going to lose that championship, because that's the big moment you've been waiting for so long, that that title reign was going to extend automatically. Like, you knew it wasn't going to get beat right away. But we always say, too, that's the importance of challengers. And that's why I think, honestly, when we're talking about these championship reigns, to me, Gunther's reign is the most exciting, because I think he has the biggest list of actual legitimate challengers. That you could certainly, craft an idea around these people winning the championship from Gunther, right? I said it. I mean, Punk, Rollins, Cena, even, in the right circumstance, right? Chasing that record world championship run. If Cena and Gunther were to have a match at WrestleMania or something like that, that makes a lot of sense. You can get back to other pairings. I mentioned McIntyre's there, Priest is there, Zayn, Jay. Like, there are so many different options, I feel like, on Raw for Gunther, that he's never going to run out of great title programs, and it could extend his reign very long, into beyond WrestleMania. Don't know. But I just think that he's one that naturally is set up for a long reign. Cody, meanwhile, right now, you've got to probably look at this and feel like, can you convince yourself that Owens is going to beat him for the title without a heel turn? Probably not. If it happens, maybe it's a little bit more intriguing, but you still feel like the ultimate destination for Cody, if he's going to lose the title, in my opinion, it's probably only to two people. And I'm not going to include Roman Reigns in there, even though we probably will get that match at some point. I've come more around on probably the likelihood of getting a third match between the two. At first, I did not think they would do it. Maybe they will at some point, but I still think that the only two people that have a chance of taking the belt off of Cody, and maybe Reigns, I shouldn't leave him out of there, but I still think it's either Orton or The Rock. And I don't think The Rock makes a lot of sense to win the title, but I could absolutely see The Rock beating Cody for the championship if they decide to do that at WrestleMania next year, because then what? You get the big, publicity of The Rock winning the title, and all of a sudden you've got, heel Rock as the champion, and but it's then at that point you're like, wait a second, Rock's not going to be defending every month at PLEs and all that. I don't think that's as likely to happen, but I do think Orton beating Cody, to me, is the one that just makes the most sense, because you would give Orton then that 15th world title win, and you set him off into a different direction as a heel, and I think there's a lot of fun you can have with that. But I don't know. I don't think Cody has many challengers. And you guys know, we mentioned that after WrestleMania 40. We said, look at the SmackDown roster. Who is Cody going to face for the next several months until he gets to whoever? Until he gets to Orton. That was what we were talking about. And yeah, he faced AJ Styles a couple times, faced Logan Paul, faced Solo, but you just were not going to be convinced in any way that any of those guys were going to win the title from him. The only reason you could convince yourself Solo is because it was going to tie into Roman Reigns somehow. But yeah, just didn't think that was going to happen. So, I think that's it, Calvin. It's who's going to take the title. Like, we don't know. So I think these are, these world title reigns especially are going to be kind of fun to see what they do here, because Gunther's got a lot more options than I think Cody does, even though Cody's options feel pretty set at this point. Like, you feel like it's Owens, then Orton, then Rock, probably, right? That's probably the order, I would feel like, for Cody. So, it is stepping up a bit for Cody now. It's not kind of that summer lull where, in no stratosphere was Logan Paul going to beat Cody for the championship. So, nothing against AJ Styles, but he had not been positioned at that level either. So, but you could certainly see why Orton would win it. You could see why, the next big guy is going to win it. So, whether that's Rock at WrestleMania or not. So, I'm curious where you guys stand on this. We talk about this every month, and I feel like I changed my opinion. I am still the opinion that I would rather see Rock versus Roman next year at WrestleMania instead of Cody versus Rock. But I just feel like WWE has already put everything in motion to make sure that it is Cody versus Rock, because, you had the post-WrestleMania 40 thing. You had the WrestleMania 40 documentary where at the end of it, they were still bringing up Rock versus Cody. I just feel like for the story, though, that they're building with the Bloodline, if you're going to do Rock versus Reigns, which we know they wanted to do this year, I'm just like, I feel like you have to do it next year. Because if you wait another year, I'm like, The Rock's getting older. Reigns is not full-time. Like, I don't know. I think it's dangerous to wait another year, knowing that they've been wanting to do this match for years and years and years. But we'll see what happens. But again, anyways, guys, if you have any more questions, any more comments, let me know in the chat. If not, we'll hop off here in just a bit. Again, these aren't always our biggest live streams we do for the afternoon ones for the PLEs that are international, because, again, you just don't have as many people sometimes watching this early in the day. But if it was at night, kind of your traditional PLE/pay-per-view time, we usually have a little bit more engagement here. But again, you guys let me know your thoughts, any predictions you have coming up here in WWE, whether it's on Raw, on SmackDown, anything happening. But like I said, we are now waiting for Bad Blood, which will happen in 1st of October. So we're several, about a month away from that. And I said if I had to probably make some predictions right now for how Bash in Berlin plays into what kind of card we're going to get at Bad Blood, I do feel pretty confident we're going to get Priest versus Balor, Rhea versus Liv. I think that we're probably looking at, that Cody versus Owens rematch maybe. And we definitely know we're getting Punk versus McIntyre in the trilogy there to wrap that up, I would expect. Beyond that, I think there are some interesting ideas where, the possibilities, right? Bayley versus Tiffany Stratton. We saw that on SmackDown last night. Bayley makes her come back, goes after Tiffany, the person who kind of cost her, the shot at or cost her the championship, it feels like. So, that's something you could see happen. How did the Bloodline tie into it? We know the tag team situation there. We know next week it's going to be the Bloodline versus DIY versus the Street Profits. You would expect that the Bloodline comes out on top in that, but what is next? I don't think Cody's challenging, or I don't think Solo's challenging Cody at Bad Blood. I just don't see it happening. But somehow you got to figure the Bloodline's involved in something at Bad Blood. And again, maybe that's by that point we already know you have a return of someone else, whether that's Jimmy or someone like that. But yeah, I'm not sure. So we'll talk more about that obviously in the build today. I think we're going to have a big, when SmackDown makes the move to USA Network in a couple weeks, we're going to have kind of a big turning point, I think, for some of those stories leading towards Bad Blood in October. Yeah, I think that will kind of tell us a lot about the card from the SmackDown side, especially when it comes to the Bloodline, because WWE's going to put a lot into the SmackDown, the USA Network thing. We know that. I mean, Michael Cole's moving back to SmackDown on commentary. We heard that last night. And, for the time being, they're going to make SmackDown, kind of a big thing. So, yeah, we'll see what happened. But anyways, guys, any more thoughts on Bash in Berlin? Again, give me your grade. What did you think of Bash in Berlin? Give me a grade. I thought this was a very good show. I don't know what I would grade. I'm terrible at the grades. What would you say? Probably, I think it's probably good, B+, A- type show. I mean, I didn't really think there was anything bad here. I think the crowd, as always we say with these PLEs, they just really elevated. I mean, it was a tremendous crowd and highest grossing show in WWE history, arena show that is. So they made that announcement here, and yeah, I mean, these ticket prices, they keep paying them, right? Everybody kind of talks about the high ticket prices for these shows, but that just shows you how much WWE is just on a roll right now. I mean, these prices are, they are wild, but hey, there is a demand for them, and people are paying it because it is kind of that. It's a unique situation for Germany, for Australia, for all the ones we've talked about, right? And that's kind of France. I mean, there are just so many ones where bringing these big shows there and making them feel so important. That's where that demand is there for these kind of shows, and so I love these. I love the international PLEs. I love the way they've kind of made that the approach. But now you return to the States in Atlanta for Bad Blood. So we'll see what the crowd is like there. But yeah, Vic weighing in B+. Yeah, that sounds about right to me. Like I said, I think A-, but maybe a little too high just because you only have 5 matches, right? And you probably kind of knew who was going to win most of them. And so, yeah, but the crowd was a big one. I agree, Robert. I mean, the crowd has brought all these shows up, really, when you think about, these kind of PLE, these level ones, right? Outside of WrestleMania, SummerSlam, not to say the crowds are bad there, but these sort of in-between shows, between the big four or whatever, number you want to categorize the big shows now in WWE. Yeah, the crowd's definitely brought these up for sure. No question. But Curtis thinks Cody's turning. The problem with Cody turning is that I just don't from a business standpoint, I just don't think you can do that at the moment. Now, is there a spot in the future where Cody can turn? Absolutely, because I think that, I've said, I think Cody is certainly the closest thing they've had to John Cena. And when it comes to, having just kind of that sort of face of the company, baby face type guy that is sort of that checks every mark you need for that. But he also does things that you can see a certain part of the audience turning on him for, because he does feel so sort of genuine and baby, like he is 100% babyface-esque guy. So I think that's always something that's there. But yeah, so we'll see. But hey, A plus, go for it. I mean, look, that was. I'm sure it looked too. For anybody who's in the crowd, A plus show. There's no question in my mind. But yeah, I mean, look, there was nothing bad on the show for sure. Calvin, I appreciate the nice words. Yeah, we have fun here on the channel. And again, I appreciate you guys. I mean, we hit 10,000 subscribers, a couple weeks ago. I could have started this channel back in February. I could have never imagined we'd have that many people, kind of checking out this channel on a regular basis. So I appreciate you guys. I know I haven't done as many normal videos the past couple weeks. I've been busy with other stuff, but yeah, we're going to have some fun. We've got a lot of retro stuff coming too. I know I've told you guys for months that I want to do some retro videos, looking back at like the Attitude Era, Ruthless Aggression, all that kind of stuff. So we're going to have some fun with that. I actually got a couple videos I'm already working on there that I'll have for you guys soon. So I appreciate you for sure. Yeah. Hey, Mike says Bash in Berlin, tops all. Hey, tops all in. There you go. I watched All In. I don't know what you guys think. We've always talked about AEW and whether you guys want me to actually cover AEW here on the channel. I've said it before. It's not that I have anything against AEW. I just don't. It's just not kind of what it used to be, in my opinion. I used to watch every show. I think I bought every AEW pay-per-view up until, what was it, back in April? Was that the Dynasty show maybe? Not because I didn't want to. I don't know. I just fell out of habit of watching it. And it just kind of changed a little bit for me, and I'm not sure. So I'm not all the way back there, but I will say I really enjoyed All In. I thought it was a good show. But all right, yeah, a lot of slow pace. There you go. That was probably the phrase we were looking for earlier, Vic. I mean, most of the matches were slow paced because, too, right? It's a 3-hour show, and you got 5 matches, and WWE knows how to fill out that time. So every match got a lot of time. And so you kind of had that to put the crowd in that spot. So I'm gonna get back to this one on Roman, but let's see. Let me pull this up. So I've seen this from here. So Cody took Triple H's place in the post-match interview. Okay, yeah. Again, I haven't checked that out yet, but you guys know I always watch that after we do the stream. But yeah, Cody's not. I just don't think Cody's turning in it for a long time. That's just my opinion. Because if you turn Cody, you got to have somebody to replace Cody. Right now, they don't have anybody to replace Cody in terms of like being the face of the company, in my opinion. Like Punk's not there. He's just not. It's not the same. Like Punk's just a different dude, right? And so it's not Punk, and it's nothing against Punk. It's just Cody is that guy. Like I said, he's the closest thing they've had to Cena in a long time. So, all right, so C+ or B- there. All right, that works. All right, so some of this stuff here, and yeah, I mean, I think just quickly, yeah, I think that's kind of my thing is I think they've actually done a better job more recently with certain things, but that was one of the things too. You guys know I'm into my stories, right? I'm not necessarily into, every match doesn't have to be perfect. I just like the stories, and that's what I enjoy most about it. So, all right, when is Roman coming back? So I said, they initially advertised him for the SmackDown on, what is that, September 13th? Is that the move to USA? He was initially advertised for it. They removed him from the advertising after the Bloodline beat him down a couple weeks ago. I tend to think that is either, it's either intentional, that they just don't want him on that show, or they did it because they're playing into the storyline of the Bloodline beating him down and saying, well, he's not going to be there. And then he does show up, and, maybe he's got some friends with him, right? But I still would be willing to bet that he is on that show somehow, some way, because that's such a big show for WWE to move SmackDown to the USA. And we know they like to do big stuff when they make these huge moves. Now, I don't think this is to the level of Raw going to Netflix in January, but this is still a big deal. And so I would think you want Roman on that. Because if not, it's like you brought Roman back for, 3 shows, basically, and then you don't see him again to win. So I don't know. I still think there's a good chance we see him on that show, but we'll see how it plays out over the next couple of weeks. The storylines, next week will really tell us, I think, where we're headed. So when do I think we'll see the cracks between Bianca and Jade? Well, now that they've got the championships back, I think this is where, all right, you kind of have to figure out who do they have to go through now, right? My guess is you're going to get the match with Shayna Baszler and Zoe Stark. Why? You guys remember they've been bringing this up time and time again, how Baszler made Jade tap. And, it's kind of that unintentional thing that had everybody confused at the time. But now I think you got to do that match. So Jade and Bianca have to get their win over those two. Then we'll see who else in the tag team division. Maybe they do something with Damage Control. You could certainly see a rematch probably with Fyre and Dawn, that they could justify getting a rematch at some point. So you still got a couple months, I would think, out of that. But I think you got to start putting that in motion. And like I said, it's really all dependent on, are they confident enough to do Jade versus Bianca next year at WrestleMania 41? I would think if they're doing the tag team now, they are confident in doing that. So I think you probably start to see some tension building between the two, around Survivor Series time, something like that maybe. And you could push it even before that. But I think you're going to start to see that really ramp up a bit. And because if you did it around then you could have both in the Rumble somehow. All of a sudden, one maybe cost the other an opportunity. You use the Rumble as kind of a device to really play up even more tension. And then I think you can go from there to maybe get to that one-on-one match at WrestleMania, if that is indeed their plan. So, so I think that's kind of the thing. So, so you brought this up about how Jacob Fatu tried to put the necklace on Solo and he stopped him. I think the whole necklace thing, or the Ula file, is very interesting because they did do that on SmackDown last night, where Solo just kind of called him off for a second. And Solo's like, hang on a second. Because, here's something to think about this, right? Solo has been the ultimate sort of just, heel. But even Solo is showing his respect for the Ula Fale. Now, you can say, well, he's not respecting it. He's putting it on himself when it should be Reigns'. But you remember he said that to Tama Tonga. What was that, a couple weeks ago? Where he's like, whoever this is on is the tribal chief. So even Solo, in a certain sense, is showing, kind of that respect for what this symbolizes, which I think is going to be Solo's downfall at some point. You guys know that. I've already made that prediction. I think it's going to be, The Rock going to see Solo as too weak, and Rock's going to come in. He's going to have Jacob Fatu kick Solo out the door. But I don't think it's happening anytime soon, but you can see them planting that in there. Listen, you bring up a point here where could you go back to Cody versus Solo at Bad Blood? I will say, you could see that. And I know we talked about it earlier. If there is a scenario where you wanted to do that and you do not bring Reigns back for the SmackDown return on USA Network, if you decide to hold Reigns off, that would be a big thing to do. Where if you do the rematch, then you bring back Roman and Jimmy. But again, I'm like, the problem with doing Cody versus Solo now is that just like at SummerSlam, no one is really invested in the actual match. They're only caring about what's going to happen at the end. And I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing at this point. It was okay for Reigns because that was such a big deal that you could. And look, it'd still be a big deal for Reigns to come back and Jimmy coming back and maybe something, sure. I'm not saying it wouldn't be a big deal. But you see my point here is that it would feel a little repetitive in terms of how they're going to do this because you're just not, no one is sold right now on the idea that Solo is ever going to defeat Cody Rhodes for the championship. And so that's just my thought. But who knows? Maybe they shock us all and Solo does beat Cody for the title. I don't think so. But yeah, like Rebecca's saying here, I think Roman's going to be on SmackDown on September 13th. That would be my prediction as of now. I will change it next week if I see something on SmackDown that maybe makes me rethink that a little bit. But yeah, we talked about it earlier about Liv and Dom. I can see the argument for why they should have won, and I mentioned that in the predictions video. I can see certainly why that you would think that coming out of this, because Priest and Rhea just beat. It was 5-on-2, right? That's kind of what it came down to it, and they took care of business. They still won. But I think we have to remember too where they had to get their payback, at least in the short term, for everything that happened at SummerSlam. And you can say, well, they got a little bit on Raw afterwards and all that. And yes, they did. But, I think this was one where, if you wanted to get to Rhea versus Liv, you had to, if you wanted to find a way to make that match, Rhea pinning her is your biggest reason, right? Pinning her in a tag team match. She didn't pin her for the title. She just pinned her after Liv pinned her at SummerSlam. You're 1-1 now. You're even. now you kind of have the blow-off match, right, at Bad Blood. And I think so. I can see why they did it, but I can also, as I mentioned before, I said in the predictions video, I can see why if coming out of this, Dominik and Liv don't win, I can see why some people will be frustrated at that. Because this group needs that extra something because they don't have their two biggest members anymore. They don't have Priest, they don't have Rhea. So, they kind of need that extra something to make them feel bigger. And that's why I said earlier, I think either Balor has to beat Priest or Liv has to beat Rhea, or maybe both happens if you want to really kind of make that group feel legitimate, moving forward towards the end of the year and all that. So, yeah. But I agree here on this. I think Bianca has to turn on Jade. I don't think you can do it the other way. I think Bianca is set up to turn on Jade. I think that's one that makes the most sense because, like you're saying, Jade's still going to be cheered. Jade just has a presence, not that Bianca doesn't, but this would be something new for Bianca because we have not seen Bianca in this role, since NXT early or whenever that. I mean, that's, we've seen her kind of in this same role, and I think anytime you can freshen up someone with a character like this, I think it just makes the most sense to do it. So I think absolutely Bianca's got to be the one to turn, and I think that's where when you start to see that tension building, that's what's going to happen. So yeah, I think that's the move here at some point. So yeah, I'm with you. I'd be stunned if they went the other way on this and had Jade do it because I just don't think that's the way to go here. But yeah, you guys seem to agree here. Yeah, Bianca's the better heel because if it's Jade too, I think. I don't know. I just don't see it. I think it's 100% Bianca making the turn. So, yeah. But, yeah, it wouldn't do a lot. I mean, that's the thing, right? That's how it's a great point here. This is the best point you can make in terms of why you would turn Bianca on Jade is because Jade needs a win over someone like Bianca. Like that gives Jade, as you're saying, that's the biggest win of her career, right? Over Bianca, who has been at the top of WWE for years now in the women's division. And so, that's exactly why you need it to be that way. Because otherwise, what good is it for Bianca to just go and beat Jade? I mean, which, I'm sure she will at some point in the feud, but it does way more for Jade than it does for Bianca because Bianca's already been at the top. She's main evented the WrestleMania, she said. And now, if you have these two, which I would already say now, if they're doing this at WrestleMania 41, I think this has to be, I would think they're probably going to do this as a main event on one night. Night one, maybe this is your night one main event. If they feel like they can get it to that level, even though, you still got a lot of pieces to figure out, right? Because it's really going to be dependent on, well, if you do Rock versus Roman, Cody's probably got to be a main event against somebody on the other night, because we know Rock and Roman will be the main event. So those kind of things you got to figure out. But I could definitely see WWE wanting at some point to get this to a main event of a WrestleMania, one night or the other, and so, yeah. Agree with you guys on that. Great points on that. So, yeah. So Finn Balor kind of is the solo of the Judgment Day, huh? That's how we're positioning him. But, I mean, he is in that role, right? You're right. I mean, Finn is positioned in the role of solo Sikoa in the Judgment Day. And now he has to get in the ring, though. He has to get in the ring with Priest. And I think, as I said earlier, the way this match finished, I can at least be okay with the idea that Priest and Rhea won because now you saw the frustration on Finn's face. He had put this plan in motion. It didn't work. Now he's got to do it for himself, right? And again, I think Finn needs to beat Damian Priest. Like, I really, when you think about it, I mean, if they're going to make this thing feel like, it is a group that is a force to be reckoned with and not just a group that's coming off the heels of losing their top two members, and yet they cannot overcome those members at any point, in terms of like the bigger part of the story, you would wonder. I mean, if Priest just beats Balor, then what, right? But like I said, I'd be stunned probably if Priest wins his match against Balor and Rhea wins her match against Liv. Like, I just don't think you can do both. You can do one, but I don't think you can do both. And I'm curious what you guys think, but maybe it is Balor that needs to win more than Liv does in that scenario because Balor is the leader of this group and he's wanting to make this kind of his own without Priest and Rhea in there anymore. So, yeah, we'll see if that's what happens. But, all right, guys, we're going to wrap up here shortly, but I really appreciate, always enjoy your feedback, like I say, enjoy the engagement here. Having a lot of fun with these when we do the live streams for the PLEs. And, again, hit that subscribe button. Do that if you're just checking in for the first time. we do these for every PLE. We do a live stream. We do a lot of reaction videos for Raw and SmackDown. I can't say I'm able to do it every single week, especially as you guys know, sometimes for SmackDown, I can't do reaction every week, but we definitely try to do it for Raw. And we have some fun with just doing the reaction videos and all that. And then we have our fun trying to predict storylines and all that stuff here. You guys know I'll probably have something on the Bloodline soon because I'm trying to figure out the next step there, what they do. Now we got something to kind of look at with Cody and Owens. So yeah, we'll do some stuff there. But I do appreciate you guys. Yeah, I always appreciate you, the lounge hopping in. And we have fun with these. And like I said, if you're into some of the retro wrestling stuff, Attitude Era, Ruthless Aggression, I've got some fun stuff on the way with that. Kind of looking back at some different things. You'll see what I mean when those videos go up. We're going to start some new series, kind of look at retro stuff. We're going to start some new series as well with some current stuff. And you guys will see exactly what I'm talking about here in the coming weeks on that. But again, thank you for watching this Bash in Berlin live stream here. And hey, afterwards, leave some more thoughts if you want in the comments. And hit that subscribe button, hit the like button on your way out. Turn on those notifications. That way you know when we go live as well. And I appreciate you guys watching as always. And I'll talk to you again here soon at Wrestling Reaction.